Picture a 7-year-old standing in the hallway of their childhood home, small fingers pressed against the cool wall, listening to their parents argue in the kitchen. The words are muffled, but the energy is sharp, cutting through the house like invisible glass. The child doesn't understand the content, but their nervous system records every detail. The tension in the air, the way love feels dangerous, the way safety can evaporate in an instant. Now picture that same person at 35, sitting in a coffee shop with their partner who just said, "We need to talk." Their heart rate spikes, their palms sweat, their mind races through every possible thing they might have done wrong. That 7-year-old is still there, still pressed against the wall, still bracing for the world to crack open. This is the invisible inheritance of childhood wounds, the way our earliest experiences create blueprints for how we navigate love, trust, and safety for the rest of our lives. These aren't dramatic traumas that make headlines. These are the quiet injuries, emotional fractures that happen in ordinary homes with ordinary people who are doing their best with their own unhealed wounds. If you've ever wondered why you react so strongly to certain situations, why you feel like you're carrying invisible weight, or why you sometimes feel like a child trapped in an adult's body, then you understand this pain intimately. Tonight, we're exploring the hidden wounds that shape us, and how the child within us continues to bleed in ways we never learned to see. Living with hidden childhood wounds is like walking through life carrying invisible shrapnel. You function, you succeed, you smile at all the right moments, but underneath, pieces of your past cut into your present with every step. These wounds don't announce themselves with obvious symptoms. They're more subtle, more insidious. They show up as the voice in your head that says you're not enough, even when evidence suggests otherwise. They manifest as the way your body tenses when someone raises their voice, even playfully. They appear in your need to over-explain, over-apologize, over-perform, as if you're constantly trying to earn a safety that was never guaranteed in childhood. The hidden wounded child within reacts to present-day situations with the emotional logic of their younger self. Your boss's neutral tone becomes your father's disappointment. Your partner's need for space becomes your mother's emotional withdrawal. A friend's delayed text response becomes the familiar ache of feeling forgotten, unseen, unworthy of consistent love. What makes these wounds particularly painful is their invisibility to others, and sometimes even to yourself. You learn to function despite the hurt, to achieve despite the fear, to love despite the terror of being left. You become extraordinarily competent at managing life from the outside, while chaos reigns within. The cruelest part is the gaslighting both from others and from yourself. You had a good childhood, people say, because there was food on the table and no obvious abuse. You're overreacting, you tell yourself, because the pain feels too big for its apparent cause. But emotional neglect is still trauma. Inconsistent love is still wounding. Being raised by people who were themselves wounded creates injuries that do unheal just because you grow up and move away. Carl Jung understood that we are born into families carrying generations of unresolved psychological material. He called this the family unconscious, the invisible web of unprocessed emotions, got an expressed grief, and unhealed wounds that gets passed down like genetic material. Children are emotional sponges, absorbing not just what is said, but what is felt. Not just what happens, but what doesn't happen. They internalize their caregiver's anxiety, depression, rage, and shame without the cognitive capacity to make sense of these overwhelming emotions. A parent's unhealed trauma becomes the child's inherited wound. Dr. Alice Miller's groundbreaking work revealed how good enough parents can still inflict lasting damage through emotional unavailability, conditional love, or the simple inability to see and respond to their child's authentic emotional needs. The wound isn't always what happened, it's often what didn't happen. The comfort that wasn't offered, the emotions that weren't validated, the authentic self that wasn't celebrated. Attachment theory shows us that children develop internal working models of relationships based on their earliest experiences. If love felt dangerous, unpredictable, or conditional, the child's nervous system learns to expect relationships to be threatening. They develop what psychologists call insecure attachment patterns, ways of connecting that protected them as children but limit them as adults. Sigmund Freud observed that the unconscious mind doesn't distinguish between past and present. The 5-year-old who felt unseen continues to feel unseen at 25, 35, 45. The child who learned that their emotions were too much grows into an adult who apologizes for feeling. These wounds create what trauma therapists call emotional flashbacks, sudden, tense emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to present circumstances, but make perfect sense when understood as the wounded child within, responding to familiar emotional triggers with familiar survival strategies. Consider Michael, a 40-year-old successful architect who can design beautiful buildings but cannot tolerate his girlfriend's tears. Every time she cries, he either leaves the room or becomes angry. In therapy, he discovers this connects to his childhood with a depressed mother whose sadness felt like a bottomless pit that might swallow him whole. Michael's story illustrates the first crucial insight about hidden wounds. Our strongest adult reactions are often our youngest selves trying to protect us. The 5-year-old Michael learned that other people's emotions were dangerous, overwhelming, and somehow his responsibility to fix or flee. Adult Michael inherited this emotional logic without conscious awareness. His girlfriend's tears triggered that ancient fear of being drowned by someone else's pain. This is how hidden wounds work. They create unconscious patterns that feel like personality traits, but are actually survival strategies. The child who is overwhelmed by a parent's emotional chaos becomes the adult who avoids emotional intimacy. The child who is praised only for achievements becomes the adult who cannot rest without feeling guilty. These patterns served us once. They were brilliant adaptations to difficult circumstances. The problem is that we carry these strategies into contexts where they no longer serve us, where they actually prevent us from getting what we most want. Genuine connection, authentic love, a sense of belonging. Recognition is the first step of healing. When we can see our reactions not as evidence of our brokenness, but as echoes of our earliest attempts to survive and find love, we begin to develop compassion for both the child we were and the adult we've become. Hidden wounds create what psychologists call emotional dysregulation, a nervous system that learned to be hypervigilant in childhood and never learned how to relax. This manifests in adulthood as seemingly inexplicable reactions. The way your heart races when someone uses a certain tone. The way you feel like apologizing when you've done nothing wrong. The way you scan every room for emotional danger. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk's research on trauma shows that childhood emotional wounds literally rewire the brain. The parts responsible for threat detection become overactive, while the parts responsible for calm connection become underactive. This isn't weakness. It's neurobiology. The wounded child within operates on a different timeline than adult logic. When triggered, we don't think our way through situations, we feel our way through them, using the emotional map drawn in childhood. The child who learned that anger meant abandonment becomes the adult who cannot tolerate conflict. The child who learned that needs were burdens becomes the adult who cannot ask for help. This explains why smart, successful people can become emotionally young. When certain buttons are pushed, the CEO who crumbles when criticized, the brilliant professor who cannot handle rejection, the loving parent who shuts down when their child is upset, these aren't character flaws. They're wounded child responses. Understanding this creates space for self-compassion. When you react in ways that feel too big for the situation, you can ask, how old do I feel right now? Oh, what is the wounded child in me trying to tell me? What did they need then that I can give myself now? Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But he also understood something deeper. We must transform our wounds into wisdom, our pain into purpose. The existentialists recognize that human suffering, when consciously engaged with, can become the raw material for authentic living. Kierkegaard explored the concept of anxiety not as pathology, but as the birthplace of authentic existence. For those carrying hidden childhood wounds, this anxiety, this constant sense that something is wrong can become a doorway to deeper self-knowledge. The wound becomes a teacher. Marcus Aurelius taught that we cannot control what happens to us, only how we respond. For the adult carrying childhood wounds, this becomes profoundly liberating. You cannot change what happened to you as a child, but you can change your relationship to those experiences. You can choose to become the parent to yourself that you needed then. Jean-Paul Sartre argued that we are condemned to be free, that despite our past, we must choose who we become. This is both terrifying and liberating for the wounded adult. The patterns that protected you as a child are not permanent sentences. You have the freedom to choose different responses, different relationships, different ways of being in the world. Camus wrote about the absurd hero who creates meaning despite suffering. Your childhood wounds don't have to define your adult story. They can inform it, deepen it, make it more compassionate and authentic, but they don't have to limit it. The pain you carry can become the source of your greatest wisdom and deepest capacity for healing others. The healing journey begins with a radical reframe. Your childhood wounds are not evidence of your brokenness. They are evidence of your incredible resilience and capacity for survival. The child who learned to read emotional weather became an adult with exceptional emotional intelligence. The child who learned to be hypervigilant became an adult who notices what others miss. The child who learned to survive emotional chaos became an adult with remarkable strength and adaptability. Practical healing involves 3 core practices. Inner child work. Learn to dialogue with the wounded child within. When you're triggered, pause and ask, "How old do I feel right now? What does this part of me need?" Speak to that child with the kindness they deserve then. Comfort them, validate them, let them know they're safe now. Somatic healing. Hidden wounds live in the body. Practice grounding techniques, feeling your feet on the floor, breathing into your belly, moving your body in gentle ways. When you feel triggered, ask, "Where do I feel this in my body? What does this sensation need?" Boundary setting. Learn to recognize when your wounded child is running the show and make conscious adult choices instead. You can say no to situations that feel unsafe. You can ask for what you need. You can leave relationships that require you to abandon yourself. Remember, healing doesn't mean forgetting or forgiving. It means developing the ability to hold your wounds with compassion, while not letting them control your choices. You can honor your past while authoring your future. There's a moment in every healing journey when you realize something profound. The child who was hurt was not broken. They were human. They were doing their best to survive and find love in circumstances that were bigger than their small hands could hold. The wounds you carry are not your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. Not because you owe it to anyone else, but because you owe it to that child within who never stopped hoping for safety, for love, for the chance to be authentically themselves. Every time you choose compassion over criticism, every time you offer yourself the gentleness you were denied, every time you set a boundary that honors your authentic needs, you are healing not just yourself, but generations of pain that came before you and might have continued after you. Next, your wounds were never meant to be your identity. They were meant to be your teachers, your guides toward deeper compassion and authentic living. The pain you thought would break you has actually been preparing you for wholeness all along. Tonight, when you look in the mirror, see the truth. You are not the sum of what happened to you. You are the sum of how you chose to respond, to heal, to become who you were always meant to be. The wounded child within you is not a burden to carry. They are a part of you worthy of infinite love. If this resonated with you, know that your pain is valid and your healing is possible. Subscribe for more explorations into the psychology of our deepest wounds and the path to wholeness.